supreme with veggies and all the protein, or either one. I like mushrooms on the pizza too. Jackson doesn't, which is ridiculous. Anti-American, makes him a communist. Whatever else. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome into the Out of Bounds show. ESPN 105.9 The Zone. And we'll have Brad Edwards here in a minute. 25 years at ESPN. He's from here. From Jackson, went to JA. We grew up together. He went to the University of Alabama, 25 years with ESPN. He was part of the first game day crew. He was their first BCS expert insider. And he's a good dude, smart guy, fun guy to I thought his interview last week was spot on as far as what did he say? It's a little bit of revisionist history when it comes to Alabama, which is easy to do. We're all like that as fans. I get it. I am too. But he walked you through why Bama has been trending this way for a while, the last 3 seasons under Saban, as far as heavily penalized and not winning games by the margins that they were for that 13-year stretch. And then, also dropping some games that they shouldn't have dropped. So, and Bama now has Missouri coming up this weekend. Your SEC Insider hit this morning is brought to you by Aplos and the Renaissance. Enjoy their gyros and pizzas. They have outdoor area in the Renaissance and in Highland Village. Also, the show is brought to you by Superior Foundation. If you need French drains, which are very important, keeping water away from your home, which then impacts your foundation. But Superior Foundation, if you need French drains or foundation repair, Superior Foundation. They can get you an estimate in 48 hours or less. Their work comes with a warranty, and it's family-owned. Check. Powered by Superior Foundation. We welcome in Brad Edwards. 25 years at ESPN. From here, went to the University of Alabama and wrote the book Dynasty by the Numbers, Why Alabama Now Owns the Greatest Decade-Plus Run in College Football History. Great book. Brad Edwards joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. Brad, you laid it out for us last week. So I said this yesterday and today. People really shouldn't be surprised that they lost because of what you laid out, what had been happening in the 21, 22, and 23 season leading up to DeBoer's first season.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a case of, and look, I'm not going to act like Georgia and Ohio State shouldn't be going through the same thing as Alabama. I think Alabama's issues as far as guys transferring out, which really more often than not is just costing you depth. At least on their level, right? People who are starting for them might leave to go to the NFL, but generally starters are not going to leave to go to another school. That said, if you've got a lot of guys who are second teamers who maybe they didn't start last year, they might have been the starter this year, but they didn't stick around. They left. And the departure of Saban, like I said, kind of accelerated that process. Saban said last week, I didn't know what the number was, but I would take his word for it. He said there were 26 players who transferred out after he retired.
Dang.
So now, obviously, they signed a bunch of guys who came in and filled some of those roles. I mean, if you look at their starting lineup, there's some guys who were who came out of the portal who were starting for them, and in some cases, I would say are at least as good as the guy who went out. But then there are other positions where they clearly don't have the depth that they had before. And I don't think it shows up any more in one area than it does in their secondary, where they have, I think there are 4 different true freshmen who are playing in the secondary. I don't mean all out there at the same time. Sometimes there are 3 of them out there together. And that is the one area, if you were to ask me, what is the one part of their problem, or one of their problems that can't be fixed this season, I would say that's what it's the secondary. I mean, to a certain extent, yeah, they should get better as they get more experience, but I just don't see the issues there, as being something that's going to get a whole lot better as the season goes on. And in general, I don't think the defense has a chance to get a whole lot better. It just kind of is what it is at this point.
They have 2 losses, and they still have Missouri at home, at LSU, Mercer at Oklahoma, who can't score, and Auburn at home, who is enjoying losing games up 2 scores in the second half.
Yeah.
So I guess you probably circled at LSU. If they go 10-2, maybe they make it in. If they drop another one, they're out.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're an Alabama fan, it feels like the season's over. Like this is a level of mediocrity like that you haven't experienced in a long, long time, and yet because of the expanded playoff field, they're still very much in it. Like you said, you look at that schedule. The last 3 games, and I'm saying this from a selection committee perspective. If you are the selection committee analyzing Alabama's future opponents, the last 3 are garbage. I mean, you've got Oklahoma, Mercer, and Auburn, and you can say what you will about the potential for an Oklahoma or Auburn on a given day to, give Alabama a run, whatever. But if they win those games, it's not worth anything as far as building a resume. What this really comes down to are the next 2, and we all know. Look, Missouri they're a good team, but they have nowhere near the talent that Alabama does.
No.
With the game being in Tuscaloosa, Alabama has no business losing at home to Missouri. So it's a game they should win. Will they? I mean, the way they've been playing, it wouldn't shock me if it comes down to the wire, but they should win that, which basically means, Bo, if Alabama just does what they're supposed to do, and obviously they didn't do what they were supposed to do at Vanderbilt, so you can't assume that they will. But if they do what they're supposed to do, it's a one-game season at this point. It's can they win in Baton Rouge? And based on what I'm seeing from their defense, I don't like their chances against LSU's offense. I mean, I think Alabama will have to score 40 to win that game. Can they? Sure. I mean, we saw what they did against Georgia, but Jalen Milroe is going to have to play a heck of a lot better than he's played in the last 2 games. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's not playing well. One of your colleagues, Jesse Palmer, said something last week that jumped out at me. But we're visiting with Brad Edwards, Bama Insider. He joins us on ESPN 105.9 The Zone. But I was listening to Palmer talk about Milroe, and he said, look, man, he's a hell of a player. But if he gets hit or things don't go well early, he drops his eyes. And he said when things go well early for him, he keeps his eyes downfield. And I think we've seen that this year, Brad.
Yeah. Look, I saw some breakdowns of him in the Georgia game. And the guy has made a ton of progress as far as his ability to read defenses and make quick decisions. Is something that he just generally was not doing last year. Yet that kind of disappeared on Saturday. Like there was a lot of uncertainty and not to mention a lot of inaccuracy. I mean, a lot of people were complaining because he targeted Ryan Williams like 18 times in that game. But most of those times he was open. And some of them he was wide open, and Milroe didn't even throw it close enough for him to get a fingertip on it. And that's what you can't miss those opportunities. You might be able to get away with it against half the opponents on the schedule, but when you're playing a team like Tennessee or you're playing an LSU, you can't be punting on a drive where you had a receiver standing wide open in the middle of the field who probably would have gained another 20 yards after the catch if you had hit him. You can't be throwing away 40, 50-yard plays and expect that you're still going to win the game. And look, Alabama did that, but Tennessee did it as well. I mean, if you were watching that game, and Iamaleava has done that pretty consistently over the last month as they played against better defenses. He's had guys open, he's just missed them. And then finally, the difference in that game was late in the third quarter and then in the fourth quarter, the last 2 touchdowns that Tennessee scored, the second to last one was set up by a long pass. The winning touchdown was a ball into the end zone. Both of them were thrown close enough for the receiver to have a chance to make a play, and 2 different receivers made a phenomenal catch. Kind of bailed them out to some extent. It should have been an easier play, but he gave them a chance to make a play, and they did. Milroe was not even giving his guys a chance to make a play, and that ended up being the difference in the game.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds Show. We're talking SEC football. All right, let's move to Georgia and Texas real quick. So, Georgia, I felt like they sleptwalked the last month and a half. Like they smashed Clemson, Brad. And then they just kind of cruised. And I know they lost.
Was just the second half. Like, even the first half against Clemson, the defense was great, but the offense was struggling to find itself. But go ahead.
And so they blew out Clemson, you're right, in the second half, and then they fell asleep against Bama in the first quarter, and then they've just kind of sleptwalked through the thing, and then they turned it on. I mean, they dominated Texas, Brad, on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they showed how good they are. I mean, I was going to say how good they're capable of being. That is how good they are. The question is, can they put it together whenever they need it? Because, look, at this point, I'm not worried about them making the playoff. But this is no longer, the 4-team model where there's a very good chance that you're going to draw a semifinal opponent. Not always, but in many of those years, like the best team would have a semifinal game that really wasn't going to be a challenge. It was really a one-game, winner take all for the national championship, and that was all they had to worry about after they won the SEC title. And now you're looking at a format where, like, once you get in, I mean, you're probably going to have to win 3 games in a row against top 10 teams. And so the question is, do you have the consistency to be able to do that? And I look around the country right now, and I don't know that I see anybody that I think has the – now, obviously, somebody's going to do it. Somebody has to win. But I think that's where, as a fan, this becomes fun because as dominant as Georgia was the other night, you look at, okay, what they did against Alabama. Granted, it was really one bad quarter. You could say it was one bad half, but it was enough to cost them the game against a team that had their level of talent. You look at the next two. Everybody thought they were going to, come back on fire and just, take it out on Auburn and State, and they didn't. They just kind of sleptwalked through those games. And so I haven't seen anything out of Georgia yet to lead me to believe that – I'm not saying they can't do it, but I haven't seen anything to lead me to believe that you can count on them to bring it 3 weeks in a row.
Right.
And I would say that about every other team out there. And look, it's one thing to have the ability and just not come in with the attitude. That's the only question with Georgia. Are they going to come in with that attitude? There are a few teams that fall into that category. There are others that I'm just not even sure they have the ability. Alabama would be one of them right now. I mean, if you just look at the way that they're playing in so many phases of the game, even if they were to beat LSU and make it to the playoff, unless something changes drastically, while I do think they're capable of beating anyone on a given day, this team has not shown that they have the ability to string together 3 of those in a row against the type of competition that forces you to play your A game. So how many teams are – I mean, look, I'm looking at it right now, and I see 4 teams that I think are actually good enough to win the whole thing. And that's Georgia. I'm going to continue to give Texas benefit of the doubt. I might change my mind on them in the coming weeks, but for now I still think Texas is good enough. And then in the Big Ten, Oregon and Ohio State. And at this point, once again, I might change my mind on Texas and I might change my mind the other way on somebody else. But at this point, those are the only 4 that I think are capable of winning the national championship with this new format.
Brad Edwards, 25 years at ESPN. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show. We're talking Bama and Georgia and Texas, trying to figure this thing out. Curious as what's going to happen this weekend with A&M and LSU. That they're both undefeated in conference play. Somebody's taking their second loss this weekend in College Station, so that could be a hell of a football game. I know you've been away from it, but do you have some thoughts? Kind of, you just nailed it and framed it up. Look, we don't know who can make the run all the way through. Nobody's really proven that we're like, oh yeah, that team's going to do it. Do you have some thoughts on the portal? You mentioned it last week. Hey, Bo, these players are leaving Georgia, Bama, LSU, Ohio State. They're not going to wait 3 years to play. If they're second and third team, they're going to go somewhere else and play. Do you feel like we still need 2 or 3 more cycles to really figure out how this thing's going to look for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think the question is, will the NCAA or the conferences as a group, put together any type of regulations that change the way that this works? If we assume that it's just going to continue a little bit of wild, wild west, where there just aren't a whole lot of guidelines around what you can't do, then I think what we'll continue to see is this is going to have enough of an effect on the teams that recruit at the highest level that they just won't dominate in the same way. Look, they're still going to be the best teams, but they won't be as far ahead of everybody else as they have been for most of the last 10 years. And so I think, for the general fan out there, that's fun. The idea that, hey, if Carson Beck doesn't play well, that Georgia is beatable. Now, look, you're not going to go in and have a chance against them if you've got a bunch of 2 and 3 stars. But if you've got enough 4 stars and a couple of 5 stars and they don't play well, you've got a shot. And I think that's fun. Just knowing that some of these teams that you kind of in the past felt like, hey, like when Alabama was in their heyday, they're going to have to turn the ball over 5 times for you to have a chance to beat them.
Right.
And I don't think that's the case anymore for the very best teams. And I think the portal is a big part of that, and NIL contributes to it because I think that kind of encourages more kids to get into the portal.
Right. So you're speaking of like your book, you focused on Alabama from 2008 to 2020 in Dynasty by the Numbers. I think going forward, that's over, Brad, for a Georgia or Alabama.
Well, look, I mean, nobody did it before Alabama either. So it was just I don't know if you call it lightning in a bottle or whatever it is, but Saban obviously had some great teams, recruited at an incredibly high level. The rules around the game were such that even though he did have players transfer, it's not like he didn't have as many as there would have been today because they couldn't transfer out and play immediately the next season somewhere else. They were going to have to sit out a year, which discouraged a lot of it. And look, if we're going to be honest and we look at it closely, he won 6 national titles in 12 years, but now, and I want to be honest both ways. There were a couple other years that he could have won and he didn't. But I think you also have to say some of the years that he did win, they were very fortunate, not necessarily on the field as far as any of the games they won. Although you could look at that national championship, the 2nd and 26 Tua in overtime against Georgia and say, okay, you know what? They were fortunate to win that game. But some of those other years, like you look at, so 2015, when Ole Miss gave up the 4th and 20-something or whatever it was to Arkansas, which allowed Alabama to win the West that year and go on and win the national championship. I mean, there were some things like that happened every now and then. So every one of Alabama's national titles wasn't necessarily a dominant season. And in some of those cases, they needed and got some unexpected help from what happened with another team in order to open the door for them to get back into the championship. So, yes, it was amazing what happened. But it was very close to not happening, in addition to the fact that the rules today are just going to make it about impossible for somebody else to replicate that.
All right, I'm going to say this, and I'm not saying it as a shot against the guy because he's had a hell of a career, but I don't watch Feinbaum, but I turned on the first 15 minutes yesterday, and you know all about this. You're a University of Alabama alum, 25 years at ESPN. You've done shows there. You know Feinbaum. Brad, it was an absolute circus plus a goat rodeo, the way they were reacting to losing. Brad Edwards.
Hey, that's what you get when you have that much success, and you come to expect that the worst that could possibly happen is a 10-2 season, and now you've already got 2 losses, and you're barely over halfway through, and so look, I mean, I kind of look at it as an Alabama alum. I've seen my school win 7 national championships in football since I enrolled there. If they never win another game, I have witnessed things that most people never get a chance to witness in their lifetime. So I'm not living and dying over it. And I know I've been in the media, so to a certain extent, I've kind of emotionally checked out more so than most fans have. But I mean, come on. I mean, when you have had that kind of success, watch your team have that kind of success, at some point it's going to end. And I think a lot of Alabama fans, the silent majority, recognize that, and they kind of shrug their shoulders, and it was bound to happen at some point. But yeah, I mean, there is that element out there that feels entitled that this should happen every single year. We should be contending for a championship. I mean, to me, it's actually kind of funny in addition to being sad. But at the same time, I don't think that I haven't given up on DeBoer. Like I don't know this is a bad hire, because I watched DeBoer succeed at other places before Alabama, and I know the type of offense that he ran, and I know that Jalen Milroe is not the ideal quarterback for his system. He kind of got stuck. I'm not saying the guy doesn't have a ton of talent and can't do a lot of things your typical quarterback can't, but I'm just saying if you gave him 10 very talented quarterbacks to choose from to run his offense, Milroe would not be the guy he chose.
Right.
And so I think you're going to see a different Alabama moving forward after this year. And I think they'll be better in some ways, not better for getting rid of someone as far as like, what they bring as a person, but just as far as a skill set and how it fits what DeBoer wants to do. And that probably applies to some extent on defense as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. Have a great week, buddy. We appreciate you.
Okay. You as well, man. Thanks again.
Brad Edwards, 25 years at ESPN. He's from Jackson and went to the University of Alabama and actually has perspective. How many times can you say that? He didn't just go. He graduated from the University of Alabama and has perspective. Did you hear that? He's like, Bo, I've been able to witness seven or eight national championships, and I get how absurd and ridiculous that is. His book is Dynasty by the Numbers. Beautiful book, and well done. Thanks to Brad for joining us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. We would like for you to try the Highway 61 Bacon and Blue Burger at Burgers Blues Barbecue, B3 and Dogwood Flowwood. Plus, they have the blue plates every day at B3. So say it with me. Burgers, Blues, Barbecue, Dogwood Flowwood. Blue plates. The Dirty Bird wrap, which is fried chicken, is so good. It's one of my favorite sandwiches in the state of Mississippi. Their Highway 61 Bacon and Blue Burger. All at Burgers Blues Barbecue in Dogwood Flowwood. They're open for breakfast too. B3, baby. Thanks for listening to the show. Your next set of tires and wheels is powered by Rick's Pro Truck.